Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we'll be talking about the spell Glyph of Warding.
Glyph of Warding is long and expensive and basically just for DMs, but maybe you're out there somewhere and you're like, hey DM, I really want to live out my fantasies of Home Alone in Dungeons and Dragons. And then you go, okay, fine, we can do this one encounter, and then you take Glyph of Warding. That's what the spell does.
Yeah, we've done a couple of these where it's defending a place kind of spells, but it always comes back to how often are you really defending a place?
Yeah, it's like Guards and Wards, right?
That's the other one I was thinking of. Okay. Well, what does Glyph of Warding specifically do?
Okay, so this is notably, I don't believe it's a ritual spell, which is a real bummer. It's a 3rd level, hour-long cast time spell. You touch an area, it requires 200 gold. It lasts until dispelled, so once it's down, it's there forever. Or until it triggers.
Until it triggers, okay.
Yes.
That's an important distinction.
Yes. So if hypothetically these things can be there for thousands of years before anyone triggers them. In any case, you inscribe a glyph with a magical effect on a surface or an object. So like it can be in a closed book, it can be on a floor, it can be wherever. It can cover an area no larger than 10 feet. And if the object that you inscribe it on, should you inscribe it on an object, be moved more than 10 feet away from where you inscribe it, the spell ends and it won't be triggered. So that's something to keep in mind. So you can't like stick it in a book, close it, and then carry around a grenade. It does have to be confined to an area. It's nearly invisible. There's an investigation check to detect it. So this is why it's like a trap. It's like, oh, make an investigation check. Oh, no, you failed. Guess you explode. Which isn't, that's a time. Anyway, you decide what triggers it whenever you cast it. So you might say that whenever a creature walks within 13 or 5 feet of it, whenever 10 humanoids are within 5 feet of it, or 10 humanoids are within 30 feet of it, or whatever. You pick whatever you'd like to be the trigger, and that will have whatever the glyph does occur when that triggers. Basically, you can further refine the trigger so that, like as I just described, there are 2 kinds of glyphs you can do, but there's really like however many spells there are kinds of glyphs you can do. So the explosive runes is one of the 2 glyphs. And explosive runes is a 20-foot 5d8 fireball. That's just what it is. So you can say, all right, whenever Bob walks into this room by his lonesome and is in the center of it all, that's whenever the explosive runes trigger. And then Bob, whenever you would walk into the room, be in the center of it all, it explodes and you probably take a bunch of damage and die. Alternatively, you can store a prepared 3rd level or lower slot as part of casting the spell in this, which means you consume it. So you consume the 3rd level slot to cast this and an additional spell slot. When you do, it has no immediate effect, but will be cast whenever the triggering effect happens. If the spell is a target, targets the creature that triggered the glyph. So if like a bunch of creatures trigger the glyph, I believe it will affect as many creatures as it is able to that would have triggered it. So like a mass suggestion, for example, because you can upcast this to do higher level spell slots, you can have it affect multiple creatures, but only with spells that affect multiple creatures. Otherwise, it just does one. You can summon harmful things. You can explode. You can, I don't know, cast fly on a buddy for some reason. Maybe you can use these defensively to be like, great, whenever I'm sprinting over this glyph, I want it to trigger on me and me alone and cast fly on me, and then you can fly off into the sunset and have a grand old time. Additionally, it has a neat line of text for that specific situation where if a spell requires concentration, instead just lasts for until it's for duration, which is neat. So this can be a way that you can double up on concentration effects in very niche situations. Again, this is like fighting against home invaders kind of situations. And then it has the higher levels. You can get more damage on the explosive runes, which is just put a fireball in it. If you're going to cast this anyway, that's going to do more damage and function the same effect. Or you can store higher level slots. Notably with the 9th, 8th, and 7th level slots, you have to use a higher level Glyph of Warding. So you can never store a 9th level slot unless you can somehow get an extra 9th level spell slot somewhere, because it does have to be both. Anyway, that is all a lot of words for what is basically a stick a spell somewhere and it triggers whenever you want to, kind of.
Yeah, I find a little bit peculiar that it's got the spells or the explosive runes when it could just be the spells, and if you want the explosive runes, throw a fireball in it.
Yeah, I entirely agree. I feel like they probably could have cut down like 6 paragraphs in here and it would be exactly the same.
All right, so yeah, I guess the hour cast time is really the kicker. That it's essentially only for home defense, unless you've got some kind of, if you know where you're going to fight in over an hour, then you could use it. But yeah, any other great ways to use this?
This is again very similar to Hollow we talked about prior, where it's definitely the kind of spell where you can do pretty cool things with it. Those pretty cool things are always going to just be like things you can normally cast, though. So there's like a ceiling on how epic this can ever be. Hollow at least is like its own big cool center effect. It's like, elementals or celestials or whatever can't get in, and we get a cool boon, and a whole bunch of things are rewarded for fighting here. This is just you cast a spell that you already have prepared that normally is a faster cast time than this. So where the neat thing comes in is whenever you kind of can break the rules with those spells. Oftentimes it's going to let conceivably you double up on conjuration magic, so you can like summon multiple creatures with it. So you spend an hour, throw a upcasting this to 5th level or whatever, stick a 5th level summoning spell in there like Conjure Minor Elementals or something, and then you can conceivably trigger it, get all of those creatures summoned in the space, and then have those to do with as you will without taking concentration slot, and then also cast it again or cast something else with concentration. Breaking concentration is really like where this is kind of at its best. It isn't, I don't think it's revolutionary or anything, nor do I think like, because it's 200 gold a pop to use, I struggle really to get it to see it being all that much better than a way to double up on concentration in some niche places. And that's normally going to be like doubling up on concentration effects while you're also planning to fight nearby. I'm reading through it again just because I'm like it has some, you're the caster, so I believe summoned creatures should still be under your control, which means you could do some munchkin-y things where like you cast half your spell list as just Glyph of Wardings that trigger whenever you enter into a room to summon a bunch of creatures, and then you do that, summon all the creatures after you finish the next long rest, and then run out with a gigantic army of murder monsters. I don't know if that's something you can legally do or not. I'd have to consult the internet. But like that's kind of the direction it goes. And to be honest, I don't find that to be all that interesting or engaging. It's like, wow, summoning magic's busted. Who would have thunk it? So that's kind of where I land with this. It's all the spells you would already have access to, all the cool toys that you could already do. You just put an hour delay trigger on it and remove concentration. And that's like,
Yeah, I'm thinking the same. I'm sure there are, and commenters, please leave your notes leave your comments in the comment section. But yeah, there've got to be like cool busted things to do with this, but nothing's really, I mean, just with the massive amount of spells that there are, and things you wouldn't normally be able to combine because of the concentration limitations, I'm sure there's fun to be had, but just the gold cost is probably a good thing in this case, especially if you do have like really busted things you figure out how to do. But just that hour casting time, that's it's going to be so niche that you can actually use this in a fight situation. And I guess you could use it to start a fight.
Sure. It's rough, right? Being the same time as a short rest, you're normally short resting because you don't intend to be fighting in a spot, right? So if you have the hour to short rest, are you really like, is that spot going to be, do you have the hour to like prep it and expect a fight to happen there is already kind of iffy. You definitely like touched on it more than I have, of like where you're casting this matters a lot. And if you're in, it costs you a lot of resources to do it. If you don't do the explosive glyphs, you're taking another 3rd level or lower spell for it, right? Like you're taking another spell slot from your repertoire. So if you're planning on not long resting and you're going into another fight, like that's not, hold on, I might be wrong. Let me double check. Let me read this for like the 6th time. I'm sorry, there's a lot of text. I don't know if you have to consider the 2nd spell slot. In either case, regardless of if you're spending the spell slot or not, the extra one, this is still, most Dungeons and Dragons is there's a bad thing happening or a bad monster out there or a treasure trove waiting to be plundered, go get it. And that normally doesn't involve spunkering down on a spot, waiting for enemies to come fight you. It normally doesn't
Yeah.
involve doing the dungeon prep stuff. For a DM, this is a perfectly serviceable tool. We haven't really touched on that, and I think this is definitely, honestly, probably should just be a trap in the Dungeon Master's Guide more than an actual player option to remove some of the cheesy metagaminess that may pose some interesting questions. I don't know. I think the trap mechanism, though, is really bland. It's really simple to understand, but it's basically comes down to you're walking through a room. If it's proximity based, make an investigation check. You have to be looking for it. Then you make an investigation check if you are looking for it. And if you fail that investigation check, you explode. And if you pass the investigation check, you go, there's a spooky glyph there. I don't want to walk anywhere closer to it. And that's the end of the trap. So, like, I don't know, don't love it. But if you're like first time DMing and you want to try your hand at traps and you have no idea where to start, this is a place.
It is. I'm still fixated on trying to figure out when to use it, because I think it is cool. I think having a spell stored, and I do like the duration of until triggered. But yeah, I guess, I mean, the only thing I'm thinking is if you're in a dungeon, you cast it and then find some monsters to run away from and hope they chase you. Or if you get into the big bad's lair and he doesn't
And
notice
have
you.
time to short rest.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
You could, you could have these all over the place, and it would be a lot of fun if you cast hundreds of these, like just in random places in the woods and stuff, and
just casually spend 200,000 gold to put hundreds of these in the woods, you know.
Right. And then occasionally you're just having a mojito or something, and I just leveled up. You know.
I think you could probably do a cool like superhero launch bay montage where you just have like 12 glyphs of warding. The party walks over to trigger and they get like the haste effect, they get the fly effect, they get all the different superpowers loaded in from your spell book that you put there a little while ago, and then you run off into the world to go fight things. Because like a lot of concentration effects that you could stick in a glyph of warding, they have decent duration sometimes. Other times it's like a minute, and that's a real bummer. But if it has like an hour or 2 hour or 8 hour duration, like you can just stick these around if you really want to and be like, oh, we know where the healing glyph is. Go get it.
That's true. Yeah. If you did know where you're going to have a fight in a month from now, then you could load these up with multiple different kind of concentration things. And yeah, you could be hastily flying all over the place and shooting lightning bolts, whatever. I don't know.
And that will all come down to ultimately never happening, because even in the situation where it does happen, the month of game time is probably like a year and a half of real time, and there's no chance anyone's remembering what glyphs are where. 0%. The DM might have wrote it down, but probably not, and the guy casting it definitely lost that paper the moment it happened. So it's neat to think about. I think it's a cute little thought experiment as to be like, how best could you use these as a player? Oh, maybe we should have a big coordinated strategy and everyone talks and bunkers down and you have a cool strategy meeting of here are all our maps and stuff, and this is where we want to be and this is how things are going to go. And then within 5 minutes, it's deeply off the rails and someone is trying to, blow up the barn because they got slighted by the farmer and their cow, and everything veers off into completely different directions. And then you wasted $2,000 in cliffs that no one's ever going to touch.
All right, are we done?
I mean, it's Glyph of Warding. This is a trap spell for DMs more than anything else. It's not even a good trap. It's just kind of really you might be able to come up with some cool triggers to be like, this only triggers whenever this happens. Don't open the spooky Book of Darkness. And, there is a small fun element of, I'm definitely opening the spooky Book of Darkness and watching my character die. Like, I've done that on more than one occasion, knowing that it almost certainly led to horrible outcomes for me, just because it can be like, it's fun to poke the bear. Yeah, but that's the best the Glyph of Warding is going to get. I think we've really tried our best to stretch us to like the use cases for this on players, and I don't think it's that great.
Commenters, let us know if you disagree.
Yeah, I think this is a solid 2 out of 5 in that I would hazard a guess that there's probably some really busted munchkinny nonsense you can do with really long duration spells. As someone that has read every single spell in Dungeons and Dragons within the last 6 months, I'm not thinking of any, but there's probably something cracked you can do with this. There has to be, but beyond that, it's a niche DM tool, so most tables are going to find it to be wildly underwhelming.
I'm going to be slightly more optimistic. I'll give it a 3. And I want you listeners to justify that as usual. All right, that was Glyph of Warding. Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for listening and watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it. A gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description, where you'll find my Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.